Creatures that once were men. Part Roman 1 in front of you is the main street with two rows of miserable-looking huts, with shuttered windows and old walls pressing on each other. And leaning forward, the roofs of these time-worn habitations are full of holes, and have been patched here and there with laths from underneath them, project mildewed beams, which are shaded by the dust-laved elder trees and crooked white willow-spiciable flora of those suburbs inhabited by the poor. The dull green time-stained panes of the windows look upon each other with the cowardly glances of cheats through the street, and towards the adjacent mountain runs the sinuous path winding through the deep ditches filled with rainwater here, and there are piled heaps of dust, and other rubbish either refuse or else put there purposely to keep the rainwater from flooding the houses on the top of the mountain among green gardens, with dense foliage beautiful stone houses, lie hidden the belfries of the churches rise proudly towards the sky and their gilded crosses shine beneath the rays of the sun during the rainy, whether the neighboring town pours its water into this main road, which at other times is full of its dust. And all these miserable houses seem as it were thrown by some powerful hand into that heap of dust, rubbish, and rainwater. They cling to the ground beneath the high mountain, exposed to the sun, surrounded by decaying refuse. And their sodden appearance impresses one with the same feeling as with the half-written trunk of an old tree. At the end of the main street, as if thrown out of the town, stood a two-storied house, which had been rented from Petunikov, a merchant and resident of the town. It was in comparatively good order, being further from the mountain, while near it were the open fields, and about half a mile away the river ran its winding course. This large old house had the most dismal aspect amidst its surroundings, the walls bent outwards, and there was hardly a pane of glass in any of the windows, except some of the fragments which looked like the water of the marshes dull green. The spaces of wall between the windows were covered with spots as if time were trying to write there in hieroglyphics the history of the old house, and the tottering roof added still more to its pitiable condition. It seemed as if the whole building bent towards the ground to await the last stroke of that fate, which should transform it into a chaos of rotting remains, and finally into dust. The gates were open, one half of them displaced and lying on the ground at the entrance, while between its bars had grown the grass, which also covered the large and empty courtyard. In the depths of this yard stood a low iron-roofed, smoke-begrimed building. The house itself was of course unoccupied, but this shed, formerly a blacksmith's forge, was now turned into a doss house, kept by a retired captain named Aristid Fomich Kuvalda. In the interior of the doss house was a long, wide, and grimy board, measuring some 28 by 70 feet. The room was lighted on one side by four small square windows, and on the other by a wide door. The unpainted brick walls were black with smoke, and the ceiling, which was built of timber, was almost black. In the middle stood a large stove, the furnace of which served as its foundation, and around this stove, and along the walls, were also long, wide boards, which served as beds for the lodgers. The walls smelt of smoke, the earthen floor of dampness, and the long, wide board of rotting rags. The place of the proprietor was on the top of the stove, while the boards surrounding it were intended for those who were on good terms with the owner, and who were honored by his friendship. During the day, the captain passed most of his time sitting on a kind of bench made by himself, by placing bricks against the wall of the courtyard, or else in the eating house of Igor Vavilovich, which was opposite the house where he took all his meals, and where he also drank vodka. Before renting this house, Aristid Kuvalda had kept a registry office for servants in the town. If we look further back into his former life, we shall find that he once owned printing works, and previous to this, in his own words, he just lived and lived well to devil take it, and like one who knew how. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man of 50, with a raw-looking face swollen with drunkenness, and with a dirty yellowish beard. His eyes were large and gray with an insolent expression of happiness. He spoke in a bass voice, and with a sort of grumbling sound in his throat, and he almost always held between his teeth a German china pipe with a long bowl. When he was angry, the nostrils of his big crooked red nose swelled, and his lips trembled, exposing to view two rows of large and wolf-like yellow teeth. He had long arms, was lame, and always dressed in an old officer's uniform, with a dirty greasy cap, with a red band, a hat without a brim, and ragged felt boots, which reached almost to his knees. In the morning, as a rule, he had a heavy drunken headache, and in the evening he caroused. However much he drank, he was never drunk, and so was always merry. In the evenings, he received lodgers sitting on his brick-made bench with his pipe in his mouth. "Whom have we here?" he would ask the ragged and tattered object approaching him, who had probably been chucked out of the town, for drunkenness or perhaps for some other reason, not quite so simple. And after the man had answered him, he would say, "Let me see legal papers in confirmation of your lies." And if there were such papers they were shown, the captain would then put them in his bosom seldom, taking any interest in them, and would say, "Everything is in order, 2 kopecks for the night, 10 kopecks for the week, and 30 kopecks for the month. Go and get a place for yourself. And see that it is not other people's, or else they will blow you up. The people that live here are particular. Don't you sell tea bread or anything to eat? I trade only in walls and roofs, for which I pay to the swindling proprietor of this whole, Judas Pettenikoff, merchant of the second Guildfiv, rubles a month," explained Kuvalda in a businesslike tone. "Only those come to me who are not accustomed to comfort and luxuries. But if you are accustomed to eat every day, then there is the eating house opposite, but it would be better for you if you left off that habit. You see, you are not a gentleman. What do you eat? You eat yourself." For such speeches delivered in a strictly businesslike manner, and always with smiling eyes, and also for the attention he paid to his lodgers, the captain was very popular among the poor of the town. It very often happened that a former client of his would appear not in rags, but in something more respectable and with a slightly happier face. "Good day, your honor, and how do you do? Alive, in good health. Go on. Don't you know me? I did not know you. Do you remember that I lived with you last winter for nearly a month, when the fight with the police took place, and 3 were taken away? My brother, that is so, the police do come, even under my hospitable roof. My God, you gave a piece of your mind to the police inspector of this district. Wouldn't you accept some small hospitality from me? When I lived with you, you were. Gratitude must be encouraged, because it is seldom met with. You seem to be a good man, and though I don't remember you still, I will go with you into the public house, and drink to your success and future prospects with the greatest pleasure. You seem always the same. Are you always joking? What else can one do living among you unfortunate men?" They went sometimes, the captain's former customer, uplifted and unsettled by the entertainment, returned to the Doss house, and on the following morning they would again begin treating each other, till the captain's companion would wake up to realize that he had spent all his money in drink. "Your honor, do you see that I have again fallen into your hands? What shall we do now? The position, no doubt, is not a very good one, but still, you need not trouble about it," reasoned the captain. "You must, my friend, treat everything indifferently, without spoiling yourself by philosophy, and without asking yourself any question. To philosophize is always foolish. To philosophize with a drunken headache, ineffably so. Drunken headaches require vodka, and not the remorse of conscience or gnashing of teeth. Save your teeth, or else you will not be able to protect yourself. Here are 20 kopecks. Go and buy a bottle of vodka. For 5 kopecks, hot tripe, or lungs, 1 pound of bread, and 2 cucumbers. When we have lived off our drunken headache, we will think of the condition of affairs." As a rule, the consideration of the condition of affairs lasted some 2 or 3 days, and only when the captain had not a farthing left of the 3 rubles or 5 rubles given him by his grateful customer did he say, "You came, do you see now that we have drunk everything with you, you fool? Try again, to regain the path of virtue and soberness. It has been truly said that if you do not sin you will not repent, and if you do not repent, you shall not be saved. We have done the first, and to repent is useless. Let us make direct for salvation. Go to the river and work, and if you think you cannot control yourself, tell the contractor, your employer, to keep your money, or else give it to me when you get sufficient capital. I will get you a pair of trousers and other things necessary to make you seem a respectable and hardworking man, persecuted by fate with decent-looking trousers. You can go far now, then be off." Then the client would go to the river to work as a porter, smiling the while over the captain's long and wise speeches. He did not distinctly understand them, but only saw in front of him 2 merry eyes, felt their encouraging influence, and knew that in the loquacious captain he had an arm that would assist him in time of need. And really, it happened very often that for a month or so, some ticket-off-leave client, under the strict surveillance of the captain, had the opportunity of raising himself to a condition better than that to which, thanks to the captain's cooperation, he had fallen. "Now then, my friend," said the captain, glancing critically at the restored client, "we have a coat and jacket. When I had respectable trousers, I lived in town, like a respectable man. But when the trousers wore out, I too fell off in the opinion of my fellow men, and had to come down. Hear from the town men, my fine mannikin, judge everything by the outward appearance, while owing to their foolishness, the actual reality of things is incomprehensible to them. Make a note of this on your nose, and pay me at least half your debt. Go in peace, seek, and you may find. How much do I owe you, Aristid Fomich? Asks the client in confusion. 1 ruble and 70 kopecks. Now give me only 1 ruble, or if you like 70 kopecks. And as for the rest, I shall wait until you have earned more than you have now by stealing or by hard work. It does not matter to me. I thank you humbly for your kindness, says the client, touched to the heart. Truly, you are a kind man. Life has persecuted you in vain. What an eagle you would have been in your own place. The captain could not live without eloquent speeches. What does in my own place mean? No one really knows his own place in life. And every one of us crawls into his harness. The place of the merchant Judas Petunikov ought to be in penal servitude. But he still walks through the streets in daylight, and even intends to build a factory. The place of our teacher ought to be beside a wife and half a dozen children. But he is loitering in the public house of Vavilov. And then there is yourself. You are going to seek a situation as a hall porter or waiter. But I can see that you ought to be a soldier in the army, because you are no fool, are patient, and understand discipline. Life shuffles us like cards, you see, and it is only accidentally and only for a time that we fall into our own places. Such farewell speeches often served as a preface to the continuation of their acquaintance, which again began with drinking, and went so far that the client would spend his last farthing, then the captain would stand him treat, and they would drink all they had. A repetition of similar doings did not affect in the least the good relations of the parties. The teacher mentioned by the captain was another of those customers who were thus reformed only in order that they should sin again. Thanks to his intellect, he was the nearest in rank to the captain, and this was probably the cause of his falling so low as Doss house life and of his inability to rise again. It was only with him that Aristide Cuvalda could philosophize with the certainty of being understood. He valued this. And when the reformed teacher prepared to leave the Doss house in order to get a corner in town for himself, then Aristide Cuvalda accompanied him so sorrowfully and sadly that it ended as a rule in their both getting drunk and spending all their money. Probably Cuvalda arranged the matter, intentionally, so that the teacher could not leave the Doss house, though he desired to do so with all his heart. Was it possible for Aristide Cuvalda, a nobleman as was evident from his speeches, one who was accustomed to think, though the turn of fate may have changed his position, was it possible for him not to desire to have close to him a man like himself? We can pity our own faults in others. This teacher had once taught at an institution in one of the towns on the Volga, but in consequence of some story was dismissed after this. He was a clerk in a tannery, but again had to leave. Then he became a librarian in some private library, subsequently following other professions. Finally, after passing examinations in law, he became a lawyer, but drink reduced him to the captain's Doss house. He was tall, round-shouldered, with a long, sharp nose and bald head, in his bony and yellow face, on which grew a wedge-shaped beard, shone large, restless eyes deeply sunk in their sockets, and the corners of his mouth drooped sadly down. He earned his bread, or rather his drink, by reporting for the local papers. He sometimes earned as much as 15 rubles. These he gave to the captain, and said, "It is enough. I am going back into the bosom of culture, another week's hard work, and I shall dress respectably, and then addio mio caro." Very exemplary, as I heartily sympathize with your decision, Philip. I shall not give you another glass all this week, the captain warned him sternly. I shall be thankful you will not give me one drop. The captain heard in his voice a beseeching note to which he turned a deaf ear. Even though you roar, I shall not give it you. As you like then, sighed the teacher, and went away to continue his reporting. But after a day or two, he would return tired and thirsty, and would look at the captain with a beseeching glance out of the corners of his eyes, hoping that his friend's heart would soften. The captain in such cases put on a serious face, and began speaking with killing irony on the theme of weakness of character, of the animal delight of intoxication, and on such subjects as suited the occasion. One must do him justice, he was captivated by his role of mentor and moralist, but the lodgers dogged him, and listening skeptically to his exhortations to repentance would whisper aside to each other, "Cunning, skillful, shifty rogue, I told you so, but you would not listen. It's your own fault." His honor is really a good soldier. He goes first and examines the road behind him. The teacher then hunted here and there till he found his friend again in some corner, and grasping his dirty coat, trembling, and licking his dry lips, looked into his face with a deep, tragic glance without articulate words. "Can't you?" asked the captain sullenly. The teacher answered by bowing his head and letting it fall on his breast, his tall, thin body trembling the while. Wait another day, perhaps you will be all right. Then, proposed Cuvalda. The teacher sighed and shook his head hopelessly. The captain saw that his friend's thin body trembled with the thirst for the poison, and took some money from his pocket. In the majority of cases, it is impossible to fight against fate, said he, as if trying to justify himself before someone. But if the teacher controlled himself for a whole week, then there was a touching farewell scene between the two friends, which ended as a rule in the eating house of Vavilov. The teacher did not spend all his money, but spent at least half on the children of the main street. The poor are always rich in children, and in the dirt and ditches of this street there were groups of them from morning to night. Hungry, naked, and dirty children are the living flowers of the earth. But these had the appearance of flowers that have faded prematurely. Because they grew in ground where there was no healthy nourishment, often the teacher would gather them round him, would buy them bread, eggs, apples, and nuts, and take them into the fields by the river side. There they would sit and greedily eat everything he offered them, after which they would begin to play, filling the fields for a mile around with careless noise and laughter. The tall, thin figure of the drunkard towered above these small people, who treated him familiarly, as if he were one of their own age. They called him Philip, and did not trouble to prefix uncle to his name. Playing around him like little wild animals, they pushed him, jumped upon his back, beat him upon his bald head, and caught hold of his nose. All this must have pleased him, as he did not protest against such liberties. He spoke very little to them, and when he did so, he did it cautiously, as if afraid that his words would hurt or contaminate them. He passed many hours thus as their companion and plaything, watching their lively faces with his gloomy eyes. Then he would thoughtfully and slowly direct his steps to the eating house of Vavilov, where he would drink silently and quickly till all his senses left him. Almost every day after his reporting, he would bring a newspaper and then gather round him all these creatures that once were men. On seeing him, they would come forward from all corners of the courtyard, drunk or suffering from drunken headache, disheveled, tattered, miserable, and pitiable. Then would come the bear-like stout Alex Maximovich Simsov, formerly inspector of woods and forests under the Department of Appendages, but now trading in matches, ink, blacking, and lemons. He was an old man of 60 in a canvas overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat, the greasy borders of which hid his stout, fat, red face. He had a thick white beard out of which a small red nose turned gaily heavenwards. He had thick crimson lips and watery, cynical eyes. They called him Kubar, a name which well described his round figure and buzzing speech. After him, Kanitz appeared from some corner, a dark, sad-looking, silent drunkard, then the former governor of the prison, Luka Antonovich Mardianov, man who existed on Remeshok, Trilistica, and Bankovka, and many such cunning games, not much appreciated by the police. He would throw his hard and oft-scourged body on the grass beside the teacher, and turning his eyes round and scratching his head, would ask in a hoarse bass voice, "May I?" Note by translator. Well-known games of chance, played by the lower classes. The police specially endeavored to stop them, but unsuccessfully. Then appeared Pavel Salntsev, a man of 30 years of age, suffering from consumption. The ribs of his left side had been broken in a quarrel, and the sharp yellow face, like that of a fox, always wore a malicious smile. The thin lips, when opened, exposed 2 rows of decayed black teeth, and the rags on his shoulders swayed backwards and forwards, as if they were hung on a clothes pole. They called him a biedak. He hawked brushes and bath brooms of his own manufacture, good strong brushes, made from a peculiar kind of grass. Then followed a lean and bony man of whom no one knew anything, with a frightened expression in his eyes, the left one of which had a squint. He was silent and timid, and had been imprisoned 3 times for theft by the High Court of Justice and the magisterial courts. His family name was Kyselnikov, but they called him Poltara Taras because he was a head and shoulders taller than his friend Deacon Taras, who had been degraded from his office for drunkenness and immorality. The deacon was a short, thick-set person, with the chest of an athlete and a round, strong head. He danced skillfully, and was still more skillful at swearing. He and Poltara Taras worked in the wood on the banks of the river, and in free hours he told his friend, or anyone who would listen, tales of my own composition. As he used to say, on hearing these stories, the heroes of which always seemed to be saints, kings, priests, or generals, even the inmates of the Doss house spat and rubbed their eyes in astonishment at the imagination of the deacon, who told them shameless tales of lewd, fantastic adventures with blinking eyes and a passionless expression of countenance. The imagination of this man was powerful and inexhaustible. He could go on relating and composing all day from morning to night, without once repeating what he had said before. In his expression, you sometimes saw the poet gone astray, sometimes the romancer. and he always succeeded in making his tales realistic by the effective and powerful words in which he told them. There was also a foolish young man called Cuvalda Meteor. One night he came to sleep in the Doss house, and had remained ever since among these men, much to their astonishment. At first, they did not take much notice of him in the daytime like all the others. He went away to find something to eat, but at nights, he always loitered around this friendly company, till at last the captain took notice of him. "Boy, what business have you here on this earth?" The boy answered boldly and stoutly, "I am a barefooted tramp." The captain looked critically at him. This youngster had long hair and a weak face with prominent cheekbones, and a turned-up nose. He was dressed in a blue blouse without a waistband, and on his head, he wore the remains of a straw hat while his feet were bare. "You are a fool," decided Aristid Cuvalda. "What are you knocking about here, for you are of absolutely no use to us. Do you drink vodka? No, well then, can you steal again? No, go away, learn, and come back again when you know something and are a man." The youngster smiled. "No, I shall live with you." "Why?" "Just because." "Oh, you meteor," said the captain. "I will break his teeth for him," said Mardianov. "And why?" asked the youngster. "Just because." "And I will take a stone and hit you on the head," the young man answered respectfully. Mardianov would have broken his bones had not Cuvalda interrupted with, "Leave him alone. Is this a home to you, or even to us? You have no sufficient reason to break his teeth for him. You have no better reason than he for living with us." "Well then, devil take him. We all live in the world without sufficient reason we live. And why? Because he also because let him alone. But it is better for you, young man, to go away from us." The teacher advised him, looking him up and down with his sad eyes. He made no answer but remained, and they soon became accustomed to his presence, and ceased to take any notice of him, but he lived among them and observed everything. The above were the chief members of the captain's company, and he called them with kind-hearted sarcasm creatures that once were men, for though there were men who had experienced as much of the bitter irony of fate as these men, yet they were not fallen, so low not infrequently respectable men belonging to the cultured classes are inferior to those belonging to the peasantry, and it is always a fact that the depraved man from the city is immeasurably worse than the depraved man from the village. This fact was strikingly illustrated by the contrast between the formerly well-educated men and the mujiks who were living in Cuvalda's shelter. The representative of the latter class was an old mujik called Tyapa Tall, and angular. He kept his head in such a position that his chin touched his breast. He was the captain's first lodger, and it was said of him that he had a great deal of money hidden somewhere, and for its sake had nearly had his throat cut some 2 years ago. Ever since then, he carried his head thus over his eyes hung grayish eyebrows, and looked at in profile. Only his crooked nose was to be seen. His shadow reminded one of a poker. He denied that he had money, and said that they only tried to cut his throat out of malice. And from that day he took to collecting rags, and that is why his head was always bent, as if incessantly looking on the ground when he went about, shaking his head, and minus a walking stick in his hand, and a bag on his back, the signs of his profession, seemed to be thinking almost to madness. And at such times, Cuvalda spoke thus, pointing to him with his finger. "Look, there is the conscience of merchant Judas Petunikov. See how disorderly, dirty, and low is the escaped conscience." Tyapa as a rule spoke in a hoarse and hardly audible voice, and that is why he spoke very little and loved to be alone. But whenever a stranger compelled to leave the village appeared in the Doss house, Tyapa seemed sadder and angrier, and followed the unfortunate about with biting jeers and a wicked chuckling in his throat. He either put some beggar against him or himself threatened to rob and beat him, till the frightened mujik would disappear from the Doss house, and never more be seen. Then Tyapa was quiet again, and would sit in some corner mending his rags, or else reading his Bible, which was as dirty, worn, and old as himself. Only when the teacher brought a newspaper and began reading, did he come from his corner once more. As a rule, Tyapa listened to what was read silently, and sighed often without asking anything of anyone. But once when the teacher, having read the paper, wanted to put it away, Tyapa stretched out his bony hand, and said, "Give it to me." "What do you want it for?" "Give it to me. Perhaps there is something in it about us." "About whom?" "About the village." They laughed at him, and threw him the paper. He took it, and read in it how in the village the hail had destroyed the cornfields, how in another village fire destroyed 30 houses, and that in a third, a woman had poisoned her family. In fact, everything that it is customary to write overthing, that is to say, which is bad, and which depicts only the worst side of the unfortunate village. Tyapa read all this silently, and roared perhaps from sympathy, perhaps from delight at the sad news. He passed the whole Sunday in reading his Bible, and never went out collecting rags on that day. While reading, he groaned and sighed continually. He kept the book close to his breast, and was angry with anyone who interrupted him or who touched his Bible. "Oh, you drunken blackguard," said Cuvalda to him, "what do you understand of it?" "Nothing, wizard, I don't understand anything, and I do not read any books, but I read." "Therefore you are a fool," said the captain decidedly. "When there are insects in your head, you know it is uncomfortable. But if some thoughts enter there too, how will you live then, you old toad?" "I have not long to live," said Tayapa quietly. Once the teacher asked how he had learned to read. "In prison," answered Tayapa shortly. "Have you been there?" "I was there." "For what?" "Just so, it was a mistake, but I brought the Bible out with me from there. A lady gave it to me. It is good in prison, brother." "Is that so, and why?" "It teaches when I learned to read there. I also got this book, and all these you see free." When the teacher appeared in the Doss house, Tayapa had already lived there for some time. He looked long into the teacher's face, as if to discover what kind of a man he was. Tayapa often listened to his conversation, and once sitting down beside him said, "I see you are very learned. Have you read the Bible?" "I have read it." I see. Can you remember it?" "Yes, I remember it." Then the old man leaned to one side and gazed at the other with a serious, suspicious glance. "There were the Amalekites, do you remember?" "Well, where are they now?" "Disappeared." Tayapa died out. The old man was silent, then asked again, "And where are the Philistines?" "These also." "Have all these died out?" "Yes, all." "And so we also will die out?" "There will come a time when we also will die," said the teacher, indifferently. "And to what tribe of Israel do we belong?" The teacher looked at him and began telling him about Scythians and Slavs. The old man became all the more frightened and glanced at his face. "You are lying," he said scornfully when the teacher had finished. "What lie have I told?" asked the teacher. "You mentioned tribes that are not mentioned in the Bible." He got up and walked away, angry and deeply insulted. "You will go mad, Tayapa," called the teacher after him with conviction. Then the old man came back again, and stretching out his hand, threatened him with his crooked and dirty finger. "God made Adam. From Adam were descended the Jews. That means that all people are descended from Jews, and we also." "Well, Tartars are descended from Ishmael, but he also came of the Jews." "What do you want to tell me all this for?" "Nothing, only why do you tell lies?" Then he walked away, leaving his companion in perplexity. But after 2 days he came again and sat by him. "You are learned. Tell me then, whose descendants are we? Are we Babylonians, or who are we?" "We are Slavs." Tayapa said the teacher, and attentively awaited his answer, wishing to understand him. "Speak to me from the Bible. There are no such men there." Then the teacher began criticizing the Bible. The old man listened and interrupted him after a long while. "Stop, wait, that means that among people known to God, there are no Russians. We are not known to God. Is it so? God knew all those who are mentioned in the Bible. He destroyed them by sword and fire. He destroyed their cities. But he also sent prophets to teach them. That means that he also pitied them. He scattered the Jews and the Tartars. But what about us? Why have we prophets no longer?" "Well, I don't know," replied the teacher, trying to understand the old man. But the latter put his hand on the teacher's shoulder and slowly pushed him backwards and forwards, and his throat made a noise as if he were swallowing something. "Tell me, you speak so much as if you knew everything. It makes me sick to listen to you. You darken my soul. I should be better pleased if you were silent. Who are we, eh? Why have we no prophets? Haha, where were we when Christ walked on this earth? Do you see? And you too, you are lying. Do you think that all die out? The Russian people will never disappear. You are lying. It has been written in the Bible, only it is not known what name the Russians are given. Do you see what kind of people they are? They are numberless. How many villages are there on the earth? Think of all the people who live on it, so strong, so numerous. And you say that they will die out. Men shall die. But God wants the people. God, the creator of the earth. The Amalekites did not die out. They are either German or French. But you now then tell me why we are abandoned by God. Have we no punishments nor prophets from the Lord? Who then will teach us?" Tayapa spoke strongly and plainly. And there was faith in his words. He had been speaking a long time, and the teacher, who was generally drunk, and in a speechless condition, could not stand it any longer. He looked at the dry, wrinkled old man, felt the great force of these words, and suddenly began to pity himself. He wished to say something so strong and convincing to the old man that Tayapa would be disposed in his favor. He did not wish to speak in such a serious, earnest way, but in a soft and fatherly tone, and the teacher felt as if something were rising from his breast into his throat, but he could not find any powerful words. What kind of a man are you? Your soul seems to be torn away, and you still continue speaking, as if you knew something. It would be better if you were silent. Ah, Tayapa, what you say is true, replied the teacher sadly. The people, you are right, they are numberless. But I am a stranger to them, and they are strangers to me. Do you see where the tragedy of my life is hidden? But let me alone, I shall suffer, and there are no prophets. Also, no, you are right, I speak a great deal. But it is no good to anyone, I shall be always silent. Only don't speak with me like this. Ah, old man, you do not know, and you cannot understand. And in the end, the teacher cried. He cried so easily and so freely, with such torrents of flowing tears, that he soon found relief. You ought to go into a village, become a clerk or a teacher. You would be well fed there. What are you crying for? Asked Tayapa sadly. But the teacher was crying, as if the tears quieted and comforted him. From this day they became friends, and the creatures that once were men, seeing them together, said, the teacher is friendly with Tayapa, he wishes his money. Cuvalda must have put this into his head, to look about to see where the old man's fortune is. Probably they did not believe what they said. There was one strange thing about these men, namely, that they painted themselves to others worse than they actually were. A man who has good in him does not mind sometimes showing his worse nature. When all these people were gathered round the teacher, then the reading of the newspaper would begin. Well, what does the newspaper discuss today? Is there any Fueletin? No, the teacher informs him. Your publisher seems greedy, but is there any leader? There is one today, it appears to be by Guliev. Aha, come out with it, he writes cleverly, the rascal. The taxation of immovable property reads, the teacher was introduced some 15 years ago, and up to the present, it has served as the basis for collecting these taxes in aid of the city revenue. That is simple, comments Captain Cuvalda. It continues to serve, that is ridiculous to the merchant, who is moving about in the city. It is profitable that it should continue to serve, therefore it does continue. The article, in fact, is written on the subject, says the teacher. Is it? That is strange, it is more a subject for a Fueletin. Such a subject must be treated with plenty of pepper. Then a short discussion begins. The people listen attentively, as only one bottle of vodka has been drunk. After the leader, they read the local events, then the court proceedings. And if in the police court it reports that the defendant or plaintiff is a merchant, then Aristide Cuvalda sincerely rejoices. If someone has robbed the merchant, that is good, says he, only it is a pity they robbed him of so little. If his horses have broken down, it is sad that he is still alive. If the merchant has lost his suit in court, it is a pity that the costs were not double the amount. That would have been illegal, remarks the teacher. Illegal, but is the merchant himself legal? Inquires Cuvalda bitterly. What is the merchant? Let us investigate this rough and uncouth phenomenon. First of all, every merchant is a mujik. He comes from a village, and in course of time becomes a merchant. In order to be a merchant, one must have money. Where can the mujik get the money from? It is well known that he does not get it by honest hard work. And that means that the mujik somehow or other has been swindling. That is to say, a merchant is simply a dishonest mujik. Splendid, cry the people, approving the orator's deduction, and Tayapa bellows all the time, scratching his breast. He always bellows like this, as he drinks his first glass of vodka. When he has a drunken headache, the captain beams with joy. They next read the correspondence. This is for the captain an abundance of drinks, as he himself calls it. He always notices how the merchants make this life abominable, and how cleverly they spoil everything. His speeches thunder at and annihilate merchants. His audience listens to him with the greatest pleasure, because he swears atrociously. If I wrote for the papers, he shouts, I would show up the merchant in his true colors. I would show that he is a beast playing for a time the role of a man. I understand him. He is a rough boor, does not know the meaning of the words good taste, has no notion of patriotism, and his knowledge is not worth 5 kopecks. A Biedak, knowing the captain's weak point and fond of making other people angry, cunningly adds, yes, since the nobility began to make acquaintance with hunger, men have disappeared from the world. You are right, you son of a spider, and a toad, yes. From the time that the noblemen fell, there have been no men, there are only merchants, and I hate them. That is easy to understand, brother, because you too have been brought down by them. I was ruined by love of life, fool that I loved life. But the merchant spoils it, and I cannot bear it simply for this reason. And not because I am a nobleman. But if you want to know the truth, I was once a man, though I was not noble, I care now for nothing and nobody. And all my life has been Tamia's sweetheart, who has jilted me, therefore I despise life, and am indifferent to it. You lie, says Abiadak. I lie, roars Aristide Cuvelda, almost crimson with anger. Why shout, comes in the cold, sad voice of Mardianov. Why judge others, merchants, noblemen, what have we to do with them? Seeing that we are puts in deacon taras. Be quiet, Abiadak, says the teacher good-naturedly. Why do you provoke him? He does not love either discussion or noise, and when they quarrel all around him, his lips form into a sickly grimace, and he endeavors quietly and reasonably to reconcile each with the other. And if he does not succeed in this, he leaves the company, knowing this the captain, if he is not very drunk, controls himself, not wishing to lose in the person of the teacher, one of the best of his listeners. I repeat, he continues in a quieter tone, that I see life in the hands of enemies, not only enemies of the noble, but of everything good, avaricious, and incapable of adorning existence in any way. But all the same, says the teacher merchant, so, to speak, created Genoa, Venice, Hollandand, all these were merchants from England, India, the Stroyanov merchants. I do not speak of these men, I am thinking of Judas Petunikov, who is one of them. And you say you have nothing to do with them, asks the teacher quietly. But do you think that I do not live? Aha, I do live. But I suppose I ought not to be angry at the fact that life is desecrated and robbed of all freedom by these men. And they dare to laugh at the kindly anger of the captain, a man living in retirement, says Abiadak teasingly. Very well, I agree with you that I am foolish, being a creature who was once a man. I ought to blot out from my heart all those feelings that once were mine. You may be right. But then how could I or any of you defend ourselves if we did away with all these feelings? Now then, you are talking sense, says the teacher encouragingly. We want other feelings and other views on life. We want something new, because we ourselves are a novelty in this life. Doubtless this is most important for us, remarks the teacher. Why, asks Kanitz, is it not all the same whatever we say or think? We have not got long to live. I am 40, you are 50. There is no one among us younger than 30, and even at 21 cannot live such a life long. And what kind of novelty are we, asked Abiadak mockingly. Since nakedness has always existed. Yes, and it created Rome, said the teacher. Yes, of course, says the captain, beaming with joy. Romulus and Remus, we also shall create when our time comes. Violation of public peace, interrupts Abiadak. He laughs in a self-satisfied way. His laughter is impudent and insolent, and is echoed by Simsov the deacon and Paltara Taras. The naive eyes of young Meteor light up, and his cheeks flush crimson. Kanitz speaks, and it seems as if he were hammering their heads. All these are foolish illusions, fiddlesticks. It was strange to see them reasoning in this manner, these outcasts from life, tattered, drunken, with vodka and wickedness, filthy and forlorn. Such conversations rejoiced the captain's heart. They gave him an opportunity of speaking more, and therefore he thought himself better than the rest, however low he may fall. A man can never deny himself the delight of feeling clever, more powerful, or even better fed than his companions. Aristide Cuvelda abused this pleasure, and never could have enough of it, much to the disgust of Abiadak Kubar and others of these creatures that once were men who were less interested in such things. Politics, however, were more to the popular taste. The discussions as to the necessity of taking India or of subduing England were lengthy and protracted, nor did they speak with less enthusiasm of the radical measure of clearing Jews off the face of the earth. On this subject, Abiadak was always the first to propose dreadful plans to effect the desired end, but the captain, always first in every other argument, did not join in this one. They also spoke much and impudently about women, but the teacher always defended them, and sometimes was very angry when they went so far as to pass the limits of decency. They all, as a rule, gave in to him, because they did not look upon him as a common person, and also because they wished to borrow from him on Saturdays the money which he had earned. During the week he had many privileges. They never beat him, for instance, on these occasions. When the conversation ended in a free fight, he had the right to bring women into the doss house, a privilege accorded to no one else, as the captain had previously warned them. No bringing of women to my house, he had said, women merchants and philosophers. These are the three causes of my ruin. I will horsewhip anyone bringing in women. I will horsewhip the woman also. And as to the philosopher, I'll knock his head off for him, and notwithstanding his age, he could have knocked anyone's head off, for he possessed wonderful strength. Besides that, whenever he fought or quarreled, he was assisted by Mardianov, who was accustomed during a general fight to stand silently and sadly back with Cuvalda when he became an all-destroying and impregnable engine of war once. When Simsov was drunk, he rushed at the teacher for no reason whatever, and getting hold of his head tore out a bunch of hair. Cuvalda with one stroke of his fist in the other's chest sent him spinning, and he fell to the ground. He was unconscious for almost half an hour, and when he came to himself, Cuvalda compelled him to eat the hair he had torn from the teacher's head. He ate it, preferring this to being beaten to death. Besides reading newspapers, fighting, and indulging in general conversation, they amused themselves by playing cards. They played without Mardianov. Because he could not play honestly after cheating several times, he openly confessed. I cannot play without cheating, it is a habit of mine. Habits do get the better of you, assented Deacon Taras. I always used to beat my wife every Sunday after Mass. And when she died, I cannot describe how extremely dull I felt every Sunday. I lived through one Sunday, it was dreadful. The second, I still controlled myself. The third Sunday, I struck my sock. She was angry and threatened to summon me. Just imagine if she had done so on the fourth Sunday. I beat her just as if she were my own wife. After that, I gave her 10 rubles and beat her according to my own rules till I married again. You are lying, deacon. How could you marry a second time? Interrupted a Biedok. I just so she looked after my house. Did you have any children? Asked the teacher. 5 of them. One was drowned. The oldest, he was an amusing boy. 2 died of diphtheria. One of the daughters married a student and went with him to Siberia. The other went to the University of St. Petersburg and died there of consumption. They say ye's. There were 5 of them. Ecclesiastics are prolific, you know. He began explaining why this was so, and they laughed till they nearly burst at his tales. When the laughter stopped, Alexei Maximovich Simsov remembered that he too had once had a daughter. Her name was Lidka. She was very stout. More than this he did not seem to remember, for he looked at them. All was silent and smiled in a guilty way. Those men spoke very little to each other about their past, and they recalled it very seldom, and then only its general outlines. When they did mention it, it was in a cynical tone probably. This was just as well, since in many people remembrance of the past kills all present energy and deadens all hope for the future. On rainy, cold, or dull days in the late autumn, these creatures that once were men gathered in the eating house of Vavilov. They were well known there, where some feared them as thieves and rogues, and some looked upon them contemptuously as hard drinkers, although they respected them, thinking that they were clever. The eating house of Vavilov was the club of the main street, and the creatures that once were men were its most intellectual members on Saturday evenings or Sunday mornings. When the eating house was packed, the creatures that once were men were only too welcome guests. They brought with them, besides the forgotten and poverty-stricken inhabitants of the street, their own spirit, in which there was something that brightened the lives of men exhausted and worn out in the struggle for existence as great drunkards as the inhabitants of Cuvalda's shelter, and like them outcasts from the town, their ability to speak on all subjects, their freedom of opinion, skill in repartee, courage, in the presence of those of whom the whole street was in terror, together with their daring demeanor, could not but be pleasing to their companions. Then too they were well versed in law, and could advise, write petitions, and help to swindle, without incurring the risk of punishment. For all this they were paid with vodka and flattering admiration of their talents. The inhabitants of the street were divided into 2 parties according to their sympathies. One was in favor of Cuvalda, who was thought a good soldier, clever and courageous. The other was convinced of the fact that the teacher was superior to Cuvalda. The latter's admirers were those who were known to be drunkards, thieves, and murderers, for whom the road from beggary to prison was inevitable. But those who respected the teacher were men who still had expectations, still hoped for better things, who were eternally occupied with nothing, and who were nearly always hungry. The nature of the teachers and Cuvalda's relations towards the street may be gathered from the following. Once in the eating house, they were discussing the resolution passed by the corporation regarding the main street, viz., that the inhabitants were to fill up the pits and ditches in the street, and that neither manure nor the dead bodies of domestic animals should be used for the purpose, but only broken tiles, etc., from the ruins of other houses. Where am I going to get these same broken tiles and bricks? I could not get sufficient bricks together to build a henhouse, plaintively said Mokai Anisimov, a man who hawked kalashes, a sort of white bread, which were baked by his wife. Where can you get broken bricks and lime, rubbish, take bags with you and go? And remove them from the corporation buildings. They are so old that they are of no use to anyone. And you will thus be doing two good deeds: firstly, by repairing the main street, and secondly, by adorning the city with a new corporation building. If you want horses, get them from the Lord Mayor, and take his 3 daughters who seem quite fit for harness. Then destroy the house of Judas Petunikov, and pave the street with its timbers. By the way, Mokai, I know out of what your wife baked today's calashes out of the frames of the third window, and the 2 steps from the roof of Judas' house. When those present had laughed and joked sufficiently over the captain's proposal, the sober market gardener Pavlugas asked, "But seriously, what are we to do, your honor, eh? What do you think?" I shall neither move hand nor foot. If they wish to clean the street, let them do it. Some of the houses are almost coming down. Let them fall, don't interfere, and when they fall, ask help from the city. If they don't give it, you then bring a suit in court against them. Where does the water come from? From the city. Therefore, let the city be responsible for the destruction of the houses. They will say it is rainwater. Does it destroy the houses in the city? They take taxes from you, but they do not permit you to speak. They destroy your property, and at the same time compel you to repair it. And half the radicals in the street, convinced by the words of Cuvalda, decided to wait till the rainwater came down in huge streams and swept away their houses. The others, more sensible, found in the teacher a man who composed for them an excellent and convincing report for the corporation. In this report, the refusal of the street's inhabitants to comply with the resolution of the corporation was so well explained that the corporation actually entertained it. It was decided that the rubbish left after some repairs had been done to the barracks should be used for mending and filling up the ditches in their street. And for the transport of this, 5 horses were given by the fire brigade. Still more, they even saw the necessity of laying a drain pipe through the street. This and many other things vastly increased the popularity of the teacher. He wrote petitions for them and published various remarks in the newspapers. For instance, on one occasion, Vavilov's customers noticed that the herrings and other provisions of the eating house were not what they should be, and after a day or two, they saw Vavilov standing at the bar with the newspaper in his hand, making a public apology. "It is true, I must acknowledge that I bought old and not very good herrings, and the cabbage also was old. It is only too well known that anyone can put many a 5 kopeck piece in his pocket in this way. And what is the result? It has not been a success. I was greedy, I own, but the clever man has exposed me, so we are quits." This confession made a very good impression on the people, and it also gave Vavilov the opportunity of still feeding them with herrings and cabbages, which were not good, though they failed to notice it, so much were they impressed. This incident was very significant because it increased not only the teacher's popularity, but also the effect of press opinion. It often happened, too, that the teacher read lectures on practical morality in the eating house. "I saw you," he said to the painter Yashka Tyarin, "I saw you, Yakov, beating your wife." Yashka was touched with paint after 2 glasses of vodka and was in a slightly uplifted condition. The people looked at him, expecting him to make a row, and all were silent. "Did you see me, and how did it please you?" asks Yashka. The people control their laughter. "No, it did not please me," replies the teacher. His tone is so serious that the people are silent. "You see, I was just trying it," said Yashka with bravado, fearing that the teacher would rebuke him. "The wife is satisfied she has not got up yet today." The teacher, who was drawing absently with his fingers on the table, said, "Do you see, Yakov, why this did not please me? Let us go into the matter thoroughly and understand what you are really doing, and what the result may be. Your wife is pregnant. You struck her last night on her sides and breast. That means that you beat not only her, but the child too. You may have killed him, and your wife might have died or else have become seriously Roman 99. To have the trouble of looking after a sick woman is not pleasant. It is wearing, and would cost you dear, because illness requires medicine and medicine money. If you have not killed the child, you may have crippled him, and he will be born deformed, lopsided, or hunchbacked. That means that he will not be able to work, and it is only too important to you that he should be a good workman. Even if he be born ill, it will be bad enough because he will keep his mother from work and will require medicine. Do you see what you are doing to yourself? Men who live by hard work must be strong and healthy, and they should have strong and healthy children. Do I speak truly?" "Yes," assented the listeners. But all this will never happen, says Yashka, becoming rather frightened at the prospect held out to him by the teacher. She is healthy, and I cannot have reached the child. She is a Davila hag. He shouts angrily, I would she will eat me away as rust eats iron. I understand, Yakov, that you cannot help beating your wife. The teacher's sad and thoughtful voice again breaks, and you have many reasons for doing so. It is your wife's character that causes you to beat her so incautiously, but your own dark and sad life. You are right, shouts Yakov. We live in darkness like the chimney sweep when he is in the chimney. You are angry with your life, but your wife is patient, the closest relation to your wife. And you make her suffer for this simply because you are stronger than she. She is always with you and cannot get away. Don't you see how absurd you are? That is so, devil take it, but what shall I do? Am I not a man? Just so you are a man, I only wish to tell you that if you cannot help beating her, then beat her carefully, and always remember that you may injure her health or that of the child. It is not good to beat pregnant women on their belly or on their sides and chests. Beat her, say, on the neck, or else take a rope and beat her on some soft place. The orator finished his speech and looked upon his hearers with his dark, pathetic eyes, seeming to apologize to them for some unknown crime. The public understands it, they understand the morale of the creature, who was once a man, the morale of the public house, and much misfortune. Well, brother Yashka, did you understand? See how true it is. Yakov understood that to beat her incautiously might be injurious to his wife. He is silent, replying to his companion's jokes with confused smiles. Then again, what is a wife, philosophizes the baker Mokai Anisimov. A wife is a friend, if we look at the matter in that way. She is like a chain chained to you for life. And you are both just like galley slaves, and if you try to get away from her, you cannot, you feel the chain. Wait, says Yakovlev, but you beat your wife too. Did I say that I did not? I beat her. There is nothing else handy. Do you expect me to beat the wall with my fist when my patience is exhausted? I feel just like that too, says Yakov. How hard and difficult our life is, my brothers. There is no real rest for us anywhere. And even you beat your wife by mistake, someone remarks humorously. And thus they speak till far on in the night, or till they have quarreled, the usual result of drink, or of passions engendered by such discussions. The rain beats on the windows, and outside the cold wind is blowing. The eating house is close with tobacco smoke, but it is warm while the street is cold and wet now. And then the wind beats threateningly on the windows of the eating house, as if bidding these men to come out and be scattered like dust over the face of the earth. Sometimes, a stifled and hopeless groan is heard, in its howling, which again is drowned by cold, cruel laughter. This music fills one with dark, sad thoughts of the approaching winter, with its accursed short, sunless days, and long nights of the necessity of possessing warm garments and plenty to eat. It is hard to sleep through the long winter nights on an empty stomach. Winter is approaching, yes, it is approaching. How to live. These gloomy forebodings created a strong thirst among the inhabitants of the main street, and the size of the creatures that once were men increased with the wrinkles on their brows. Their voices became thick, and their behavior to each other more blunt, and brutal crimes were committed among them. And the roughness of these poor unfortunate outcasts was apt to increase at the approach of that inexorable enemy, who transformed all their lives into one cruel farce. But this enemy could not be captured, because it was invisible. Then they began beating each other brutally, and drank, till they had drunk everything which they could pawn to the indulgent Vavilov. And thus they passed the autumn days in open wickedness, in suffering, which was eating their hearts out, unable to rise out of this vicious life, and in dread of the still crueler days of winter. Cuvalda, in such cases, came to their assistance with his philosophy. Don't lose your temper, brothers, everything has an end. This is the chief characteristic of life. The winter will pass, summer will follow, a glorious time, when the very sparrows are filled with rejoicing. But his speeches did not have any effect. A mouthful of even the freshest and purest water will not satisfy a hungry man. Deacon Taras also tried to amuse the people by singing his songs and relating his tales. He was more successful, and sometimes his endeavors ended in a wild and glorious orgy at the eating house. They sang, laughed, and danced, and for hours behaved like madmen. After this they again fell into a despairing mood, sitting at the tables of the eating house, in the black smoke of the lamp, and the tobacco, sad and tattered, speaking lazily to each other, listening to the wild howling of the wind, and thinking how they could get enough vodka to deaden their senses. And their hand was against every man, and every man's hand against them. Part Roman 2. All things are relative in this world, and a man cannot sink into any condition so bad that it could not be worse. One day towards the end of September, Captain Aristide Cuvalda was sitting, as was his custom, on the bench near the door of the Doss house, looking at the stone building, built by the merchant Petunikov close to Vavilov's eating house, and thinking deeply. This building, which was partly surrounded by woods, served the purpose of a candle factory. Painted red as if with blood, it looked like a cruel machine, which, though not working, opened a row of deep, hungry, gaping jaws, as if ready to devour and swallow anything. The gray wooden eating house of Vavilov, with its bent roof, covered with patches, leaned against one of the brick walls of the factory, and seemed as if it were some large form of parasite clinging to it. The captain was thinking that they would very soon be making new houses to replace the old building. They will destroy the Doss house. Even he reflected, it will be necessary to look out for another. But such a cheap one is not to be found. It seems a great pity to have to leave a place to which one is accustomed, though it will be necessary to go simply, because some merchant or other thinks of manufacturing candles and soap. And the captain felt that if he could only make the life of such an enemy miserable, even temporarily, oh, with what pleasure he would do it. Yesterday, Ivan Andreevich Petunikov was in the Doss house yard with his son and an architect. They measured the yard and put small wooden sticks in various places, which, after the exit of Petunikov, and at the order of the captain, Meteor took out and threw away. To the eyes of the captain, this merchant appeared small and thin. He wore a long garment like a frock coat, a velvet cap, and high, well-cleaned boots. He had a thin face with prominent cheekbones, wedge-shaped grayish beard, and a high forehead seamed with wrinkles from beneath which shone two narrow, blinking, and observant gray eyes, a sharp, gristly nose, a small mouth with thin lips. Altogether his appearance was pious, rapacious, and respectably wicked. Cursed crossbred fox and pig, swore the captain under his breath, recalling his first meeting with Petunikov. The merchant came with one of the town councillors to buy the house, and seeing the captain asked his companion, "Is this your lodger?" And from that day, a year and a half ago, there has been keen competition among the inhabitants of the Doss house, as to which can swear the hardest at the merchant, and last night there was a slight skirmish with hot words, as the captain called it, between Petunikov and himself. Having dismissed the architect, the merchant approached the captain. "What are you hatching?" asked he, putting his hand to his cap, perhaps to adjust it, perhaps as a salutation. "What are you plotting?" answered the captain in the same tone. He moved his chin, so that his beard trembled a little. A non-exacting person might have taken it for a bow otherwise. It only expressed the desire of the captain to move his pipe from one corner of his mouth to the other. "You see, having plenty of money, I can afford to sit hatching it. Money is a good thing, and I possess it." The captain chaffed the merchant, casting cunning glances at him. "It means that you serve money, and not money," you went on Cuvalda, desiring at the same time to punch the merchant's belly. "Isn't it all the same? Money makes life comfortable, but no money." And the merchant looked at the captain with a feigned expression of suffering. The other's upper lip curled and exposed large wolf-like teeth. "With brains and a conscience, it is possible to live without it. Men only acquire riches when they cease to listen to their conscience. The less conscience, the more money." "Just so, but then there are men who have neither money nor conscience." "Were you just like what you are now when you were young?" asked Cuvalda. Simply. The other's nostrils twitched. Ivan Andreevich sighed, passed his hand over his eyes, and said, "Oh, when I was young, I had to undergo a great many difficulties. Work. Oh, I did work." "And you cheated too, I suppose?" "People like you nobles, I should just think so. They used to grovel at my feet." "You only went in for robbing, not murder, I suppose?" asked the captain. Petunikov turned pale and hastily changed the subject. "You are a bad host. You sit while your guest stands." "Let him sit too," said Cuvalda. "But what am I to sit on?" "On the earth. It will take any rubbish." "You are the proof of that," said Petunikov quietly, while his eyes shot forth poisonous glances. And he went away, leaving Cuvalda under the pleasant impression that the merchant was afraid of him. If he were not afraid of him, he would long ago have evicted him from the Doss house. But then he would think twice before turning him out because of the 5 rubles a month, and the captain gazed with pleasure at Petunikov's back as he slowly retreated from the courtyard. Following him with his eyes, he noticed how the merchant passed the factory and disappeared into the wood, and he wished very much that he might fall and break all his bones. He sat imagining many horrible forms of disaster, while watching Petunikov, who was descending the hill into the wood like a spider, going into its web last night. He even imagined that the wood gave way before the merchant and he fell, but afterwards he found that he had only been dreaming. And today, as always, the red building stands out before the eyes of Aristide Cuvalda, so plain, so massive, and clinging so strongly to the earth that it seems to be sucking away all its life. It appears to be laughing coldly at the captain, with its gaping walls. The sun pours its rays on them, as generously as it does on the miserable hovels of the main street. Devil take the thing, exclaimed the captain, thoughtfully measuring the walls of the factory with his eyes if only. Trembling with excitement at the thought that had just entered his mind, Aristide Cuvalda jumped up and ran to Vavilov's eating house, muttering to himself all the time. Vavilov met him at the bar and gave him a friendly welcome. I wish your honor good health. He was of middle height, and had a bald head, gray hair, and straight mustaches, like toothbrushes upright, and neat in his clean jacket. He showed by every movement that he was an old soldier. Igorka, show me the lease and plan of your house, demanded Cuvalda impatiently. I have shown it you before. Vavilov looked up suspiciously and closely scanned the captain's face. Show it me, shouted the captain, striking the bar with his fist and sitting down on a stool close by. But why? Asked Vavilov, knowing that it was better to keep his wits about him when Cuvalda got excited. You fool, bring it at once. Vavilov rubbed his forehead and turned his eyes to the ceiling in a tired way. Where are those papers of yours? There was no answer to this on the ceiling, so the old sergeant looked down at the floor and began drumming with his fingers on the bar in a worried and thoughtful manner. It's no good your making wry faces, shouted the captain, for he had no great affection for him, thinking that a former soldier should rather have become a thief than an eating house keeper. Oh yes, Aristide Fomitch, I remember now, they were left at the High Court of Justice at the time when I came into possession. Get along, Igorka. It is to your own interest to show me the plan, the title deeds, and everything you have immediately. You will probably clear at least 100 rubles over this, do you understand? Vavilov did not understand at all, but the captain spoke in such a serious and convincing tone that the sergeant's eyes burned with curiosity. And telling him that he would see if the papers were in his desk, he went through the door behind the bar. 2 minutes later, he returned with the papers in his hand and an expression of extreme astonishment on his face. Here they are, the deeds about the damned houses. Ah, you vagabond, and you pretend to have been a soldier too? And Cuvalda did not cease to belabor him with his tongue as he snatched the blue parchment from his hands, then spreading the papers out in front of him, and excited all the more by Vavilov's inquisitiveness. The captain began reading and bellowing at the same time. At last, he got up resolutely and went to the door, leaving all the papers on the bar and saying to Vavilov, Wait, don't lift them. Vavilov gathered them up, put them into the cash box, and locked it, then felt the lock with his hand to see if it were secure. After that, he scratched his bald head thoughtfully and went up on the roof of the eating house. There, he saw the captain measuring the front of the house and watched him anxiously as he snapped his fingers and began measuring the same line over again. Vavilov's face lit up suddenly, and he smiled happily. Aristide Fomitch, is it possible? He shouted when the captain came opposite to him. Of course it is possible. There is more than one short in the front alone, and as to the depth I shall see immediately. The depth 7 to 3 feet. What have you guessed, you shaved, ugly face? Of course, Aristide Fomitch, if you have eyes you can see a thing or two, shouted Vavilov joyfully. A few minutes afterwards, they sat side by side in Vavilov's parlor, and the captain was engaged in drinking large quantities of beer. And so all the walls of the factory stand on your ground, said he to the eating house keeper. Now mind you show no mercy, the teacher will be here presently, and we will get him to draw up a petition to the court. As to the amount of the damages, you will name a very moderate sum in order not to waste money in deed stamps, but we will ask to have the factory knocked down. This, you see, donkey, is the result of trespassing on other people's property. It is a splendid piece of luck for you. We will force him to have the place smashed. And I can tell you, it will be an expensive job for him. Off with you to the court. Bring pressure to bear on Judas. We will calculate how much it will take to break the factory down to its very foundations. We will make an estimate of it, all counting the time it will take too, and we will make honest Judas pay 2,000 rubles besides. He will never give it, cried Vavilov, but his eyes shone with a greedy light. You lie, he will give it. Use your brains, what else can he do? But look here, Igorka, mind you don't go in for doing it on the cheap. They are sure to try to buy you off. Don't sell yourself cheap. They will probably use threats, but rely upon us. The captain's eyes were alight with happiness, and his face red with excitement. He worked upon Vavilov's greed and urging upon him the importance of immediate action in the matter, went away in a very joyful and happy frame of mind. In the evening, everyone was told of the captain's discovery, and they all began to discuss Petunikov's future predicament, painting in vivid colors his excitement and astonishment on the day the court messenger handed him the copy of the summons. The captain felt himself quite a hero. He was happy, and all his friends, highly pleased. The heap of dark and tattered figures that lay in the courtyard made noisy demonstrations of pleasure. They all knew the merchant Petunikov, who passed them, very often contemptuously turning up his eyes, and giving them no more attention than he bestowed on the other heaps of rubbish lying on the ground. He was well fed, and that exasperated them still more. And now how splendid it was that one of themselves had struck a hard blow at the selfish merchant's purse. It gave them all the greatest pleasure. The captain's discovery was a powerful instrument in their hands. Every one of them felt keen animosity towards all those who were well fed and well dressed, but in some of them, this feeling was only beginning to develop. Burning interest was felt by those creatures that once were men in the prospective fight between Kuvalda and Petunikov, which they already saw in imagination. For a fortnight, the inhabitants of the Doss house awaited the further development of events, but Petunikov never once visited the building. It was known that he was not in town, and that the copy of the petition had not yet been handed to him. Kuvalda raged at the delays of the civil court. It is improbable that anyone had ever awaited the merchant with such impatience as did this barefooted brigade. "He isn't even thinking of coming, the wretch. That means that he does not love me," sang Deacon Taras, leaning his chin on his hand and casting a humorous glance towards the mountain. At last Petunikov appeared. He came in a respectable cart with his son, playing the role of groom. The latter was a red-checked, nice-looking youngster, in a long square-cut overcoat. He wore smoked eyeglasses. They tied the horse to an adjoining tree. The son took the measuring instrument out of his pocket and gave it to his father, and they began to measure the ground. Both were silent and worried. "Aha!" shouted the captain gleefully. All those who were in the Doss house at the moment came out to look at them and expressed themselves loudly and freely in reference to the matter. What does the habit of thieving mean? A man may sometimes make a big mistake when he steals standing to lose more than he gets, said the captain, causing much laughter among his staff, and eliciting various murmurs of assent. "Take care, you devil," shouted Petunikov, "lest I have you in the police court for your words. You can do nothing to me without witnesses. Your son cannot give evidence on your side," the captain warned him. "Look out all the same, you old wretch, you may be found guilty too." And Petunikov shook his fist at him. His son, deeply engrossed in his calculations, took no notice of the dark group of men who were taking such a wicked delight in adding to his father's discomfiture. He did not even once look in their direction. "The young spider has himself well in hand," remarked a Biedok, watching young Petunikov's every movement and action. Having taken all the measurements he desired, Ivan Andreevich knit his brows, got into the cart, and drove away. His son went with a firm step into Vavilov's eating house and disappeared behind the door. "Ho ho, that's a determined young thief. What will happen next, I wonder?" asked Kuvalda. "Next, young Petunikov will buy out Igor Vavilov," said a Biedok with conviction, and smacked his lips as if the idea gave him great pleasure. "And you are glad of that?" Kuvalda asked him gravely. "I am always pleased to see human calculations," miscarry, explained a Biedok, rolling his eyes and rubbing his hands with delight. The captain spat angrily on the ground and was silent. They all stood in front of the tumble-down building and silently watched the doors of the eating house. More than an hour passed thus, then the doors opened, and Petunikov came out as silently as he had entered. He stopped for a moment, coughed, turned up the collar of his coat, glanced at the men who were following all his movements with their eyes, and then went up the street towards the town. The captain watched him for a moment, and turning to a Biedok said smilingly, "Probably you were right after all, you son of a scorpion, and a woodlouse, you knows out every evil thing. Yes, the face of that young swindler shows that he has got what he wanted. I wonder how much Igorka has got out of them. He has evidently taken something. He is just the same sort of rogue. That they are all tarred with the same brush. He has got some money, and I'm damned if I did not arrange the whole thing for him. It is best to own my folly. Yes, life is against us all, brothers. And even when you spit upon those nearest to you, the spittle rebounds and hits your own face." Having satisfied himself with this reflection, the worthy captain looked round upon his staff. Every one of them was disappointed, because they all knew that something they did not expect had taken place between Petunikov and Vavilov, and they all felt that they had been insulted. The feeling that one is unable to injure anyone is worse than the feeling that one is unable to do good, because to do harm is far easier and simpler. Well, why are we loitering here? We have nothing more to wait for except the reward that I shall get out of Iguaca, said the captain, looking angrily at the eating house. So our peaceful life under the roof of Judas has come to an end. Judas will now turn us out, so do not say that I have not warned you. Canet smiled sadly. What are you laughing at? Jailer Cuvalda asked. Where shall I go then? That my soul is a question that fate will settle for you, so do not worry, said the captain, thoughtfully entering the Doss house. The creatures that once were men followed him. We can do nothing but await the critical moment, said the captain, walking about among them. When they turn us out, we shall seek a new place for ourselves. But at present there is no use spoiling our life by thinking of it in times of crisis. One becomes energetic, and if life were fuller of them, and every moment of it so arranged that we were compelled to tremble for our lives, all the time, by God, life would be livelier, and even fuller of interest and energy than it is. That means that people would all go about cutting one another's throats, explained Abiedok smilingly. Well, what about it? Asked the captain angrily. He did not like to hear his thoughts illustrated. Oh, nothing. When a person wants to get anywhere quickly, he whips up the horses, but of course, it needs fire to make engines go. Well, let everything go to the devil as quickly as possible. I am sure I should be pleased if the earth suddenly opened up, or was burned or destroyed somehow, only I were left to the last in order to see the others consumed. Ferocious creature, smiled Abiedok. Well, what of that? I was once a man now. I am an outcast. That means I have no obligations. It means that I am free to spit on everyone. The nature of my present life means the rejection of my past, giving up all relations towards men who are well fed and well dressed and who look upon me with contempt because I am inferior to them in the matter of feeding or dressing. I must develop something new within myself. Do you understand? Something that will make Judas Petunikov and his kind tremble and perspire before me. Ah, you have a courageous tongue, jeered Abiedok. Yes, you miser. And Cuvalda looked at him contemptuously. What do you understand? What do you know? Are you able to think? But I have thought, and I have read books of which you could not have understood one word. Of course, one cannot eat soup out of one's hand, but though you have read and thought, and I have not done that, or anything else, we both seem to have got into pretty much the same condition, don't we? Go to the devil, shouted Cuvalda. His conversations with Abiedok always ended thus. When the teacher was absent, his speeches, as a rule, fell on the empty air, and received no attention, and he knew this. But still, he could not help speaking, and now, having quarreled with his companion, he felt rather deserted but still longing for conversation. He turned to Simsov with the following question, And you, Alexei Maximovich, where will you lay your gray head? The old man smiled good-humoredly, rubbed his hands, and replied, I do not know. I will see. One does not require much, just a little drink. Plain but honorable fare, the captain said. Simsov was silent, only adding that he would find a place sooner than any of them. Because women loved him? This was true. The old man had, as a rule, 2 or 3 prostitutes, who kept him on their very scant earnings. They very often beat him, but he took this stoically. They somehow never beat him too much, probably, because they pitied him. He was a great lover of women, and said they were the cause of all his misfortunes. The character of his relations towards them was confirmed by the appearance of his clothes, which, as a rule, were tidy and cleaner than those of his companions. And now, sitting at the door of the Doss house, he boastingly related that for a long time past, Redka had been asking him to go and live with her, but he had not gone because he did not want to part with the company. They heard this with jealous interest. They all knew Redka. She lived very near the town, almost below the mountain. Not long ago, she had been in prison for theft. She was a retired nurse, a tall, stout peasant woman, with a face marked by smallpox, but with very pretty though always drunken eyes. Just look at the old devil, swore Abiedok, looking at Simsov, who was smiling in a self-satisfied way. And do you know why they love me? Because I know how to cheer up their souls. Do you? Inquired Cuvalda. And I can make them pity me, and a woman, when she pities, go and weep to her, and ask her to kill you. She will pity you, and she will kill you. I feel inclined to commit a murder, declared Mardianov, laughing his dull laugh. Upon whom? Asked Abiedok, edging away from him. It's all the same to me, Petunikov, Iguaca, or even you. And why? Inquired Cuvalda. I want to go to Siberia, I have had enough of this vile life, one learns how to live there. Yes, they have a particularly good way of teaching in Siberia, agreed the captain sadly. They spoke no more of Petunikov, or of the turning out of the inhabitants of the Doss house. They all knew that they would have to leave soon therefore. They did not think the matter worth discussion. It would do no good, and besides the weather was not very cold though the rains had begun, and it would be possible to sleep on the ground anywhere outside the town. They sat in a circle on the grass and conversed about all sorts of things, discussing one subject after another, and listening attentively even to the poor speakers, in order to make the time pass. Keeping quiet was as dull as listening. This society of creatures that once were men had one fine characteristic. No one of them endeavored to make out that he was better than the others, nor compelled the others to acknowledge his superiority. The August sun seemed to set their tatters on fire as they sat with their backs and uncovered heads exposed to it, a chaotic mixture of the vegetable, mineral, and animal kingdoms in the corners of the yard. The tall steppe grass grew luxuriantly, nothing else grew there, but some dingy vegetables not even attractive to those who nearly always felt the pangs of hunger. The following was the scene that took place in Vavilov's eating house. Young Petunikov entered slowly, took off his hat, looked around him, and said to the eating house keeper, "Igor Terentievich Vavilov, are you he?" "I am," answered the sergeant, leaning on the bar with both arms, as if intending to jump over it. "I have some business with you," said Petunikov. "Delighted, please come this way to my private room." They went in and sat down, the guest on the couch, and his host on the chair opposite to him in one corner. A lamp was burning before a gigantic icon, and on the wall at the other side, there were several oil lamps. They were well kept and shone as if they were new. The room, which contained a number of boxes and a variety of furniture, smelt of tobacco, sour cabbage, and olive oil. Petunikov looked around him and made a face. Vavilov looked at the icon, and then they looked simultaneously at one another, and both seemed to be favorably impressed. Petunikov liked Vavilov's frankly thievish eyes, and Vavilov was pleased with the open, cold, determined face of Petunikov, with its large cheeks and white teeth. "Of course you already know me, and I presume you guess what I am going to say to you," began Petunikov. "About the lawsuit, I presume," remarked the ex-sergeant respectfully. "Exactly. I am glad to see that you are not beating about the bush, but going straight to the point, like a businessman," said Petunikov encouragingly. "I am a soldier," answered Vavilov with a modest air. "That is easily seen, and I am sure we shall be able to finish this job without much trouble." "Just so. Good, you have the law on your side, and will of course win your case. I want to tell you this at the very beginning." "I thank you most humbly," said the sergeant, rubbing his eyes in order to hide the smile in them. "But tell me, why did you make the acquaintance of your future neighbors like this through the law courts?" Vavilov shrugged his shoulders and did not answer. "It would have been better to come straight to us and settle the matter peacefully, eh? What do you think?" "That would have been better, of course, but you see there is a difficulty. I did not follow my own wishes, but those of others. I learned afterwards that it would have been better if, but it was too late." "Oh, I suppose some lawyer taught you this." "Someone of that sort." "Aha, do you wish to settle the affair peacefully?" "With all my heart," cried the soldier. Petunikov was silent for a moment, then looked at him and suddenly asked coldly and dryly, "And why do you wish to do so?" Vavilov did not expect such a question, and therefore had no reply ready. In his opinion, the question was quite unworthy of any attention, and so he laughed at young Petunikov. "That is easy to understand. Men like to live peacefully with one another." But interrupted Petunikov, "That is not exactly the reason why, as far as I can see, you do not distinctly understand why you wish to be reconciled to us. I will tell you." The soldier was a little surprised. This youngster, dressed in a check suit in which he looked ridiculous, spoke as if he were Colonel Rakshin, who used to knock 3 of the unfortunate soldiers' teeth out every time he was angry. "You want to be friends with us because we should be such useful neighbors to you, because there will be not less than 150 workmen in our factory, and in course of time, even more if 100 men come and drink 1 glass at your place after receiving their weekly wages. That means that you will sell every month 400 glasses, more than you sell at present. This is of course the lowest estimate, and then you have the eating house besides. You are not a fool, and you can understand for yourself what profitable neighbors we shall be." "That is true," Vavilov nodded. "I knew that before." Well, what then? Asked the merchant loudly. Nothing, let us be friends. It is nice to see that you have decided so quickly. Look here. I have already prepared a notification to the court of the withdrawal of the summons against my father. Here it is, read it and sign it. Vavilov looked at his companion with his round eyes and shivered as if experiencing an unpleasant sensation. Pardon me, sign it, and why? There is no difficulty about it. Write your Christian name and surname, and nothing more, explained Petunikov, pointing obligingly with his finger to the place for the signature. Oh, it is not that I was alluding to the compensation I was to get for my ground. But then this ground is of no use to you, said Petunikov calmly. But it is mine, exclaimed the soldier. Of course, and how much do you want for it? Well, say the amount stated in the document, said Vavilov boldly. 600, and Petunikov smiled softly. You are a funny fellow. The law is on my side. I can even demand 2,000. I can insist on your pulling down the building. And enforce it too. That is why my claim is so small. I demand that you should pull it down. Very well, probably we shall do so after 3 years, and after having dragged you into enormous law expenses. And then having paid up, we shall open our public house. And you will be ruined, annihilated like the Swedes at Poltava. We shall see that you are ruined. We will take good care of that. We could have begun to arrange about a public house now, but you see our time is valuable. And besides, we're sorry for you. Why should we take the bread out of your mouth without any reason? Igor Tarantivich looked at his guest, clenching his teeth, and felt that he was master of the situation, and held his fate in his hands. Vavilov was full of pity for himself at having to deal with this calm, cruel figure in the checked suit. And being such a near neighbor, you might have gained a good deal by helping us, and we should have remembered it too. Even now, for instance, I should advise you to open a small shop for tobacco, bread, cucumbers, and so on. All these are sure to be in great demand. Vavilov listened, and being a clever man knew that to throw himself upon the enemy's generosity was the better plan. It was as well to begin from the beginning, and not knowing what else to do to relieve his mind, the soldier began to swear at Kuvalda. Curses be upon your head, you drunken rascal, may the devil take you. Do you mean the lawyer who composed your petition? Asked Petunikov calmly, and added with a sigh, I have no doubt he would have landed you in rather an awkward fix had we not taken pity upon you. Ah, and the angry soldier raised his hand. There are two of them. One of them discovered it, the other wrote the petition, the accursed reporter. Why the reporter? He writes for the papers. He is one of your lodgers. There they all are outside. Clear them away, for Christ's sake. The robbers, they disturb and annoy everyone in the street. One cannot live for them. And they are all desperate fellows. You had better take care, or else they will rob or burn you. And this reporter, who is he? Asked Petunikov with interest. He a drunkard. He was a teacher, but was dismissed. He drank everything he possessed, and now he writes for the papers and composes petitions. He is a very wicked man. And did he write your petition too? I suppose it was he who discovered the flaws in the building. The beams were not rightly put in. He did. I know it for a fact. The dog, he read it aloud in here, and boasted, now I have caused Petunikov some loss. Yees, well then, do you want to be reconciled? To be reconciled, the soldier lowered his head, and thought, ah, this is a hard life, said he, in a querulous voice, scratching his head. One must learn by experience, Petunikov reassured him, lighting a cigarette. Learn it is not that, my dear sir, but don't you see there is no freedom? Don't you see what a life I lead? I live in fear and trembling. I am refused the freedom so desirable to me in my movements. And I fear this ghost of a teacher will write about me in the papers. Sanitary inspectors will be called for fines, will have to be paid, or else your lodgers will set fire to the place or rob and kill me. I am powerless against them. They are not the least afraid of the police, and they like going to prison, because they get their food for nothing there. But then we will have them turned out if we come to terms with you, promised Petunikov. What shall we arrange? Then asked Vavilov sadly and seriously. Tell me your terms. Well, give me the 600 mentioned in the claim. Want you take 100 rubles? Asked the merchant calmly, looking attentively at his companion, and smiling softly. I will not give you 1 ruble more, he added. After this he took out his eyeglasses and began cleaning them with his handkerchief. Vavilov looked at him sadly and respectfully. The calm face of Petunikov, his gray eyes and clear complexion, every line of his thick-set body betokened self-confidence, and a well-balanced mind. Vavilov also liked Petunikov's straightforward manner of addressing him without any pretensions, as if he were his own brother, though Vavilov understood well enough that he was his superior, he being only a soldier looking at him. He grew fonder and fonder of him, and forgetting for a moment the matter in hand, respectfully asked Petunikov, "Where did you study?" "In the Technological Institute." "Why?" answered the other, smiling. "Nothing, only excuse me." The soldier lowered his head, and then suddenly exclaimed, "What a splendid thing education is, science alike. My brother, I am as stupid as an owl before the sun, your honor. Let us finish this job." With an air of decision, he stretched out his hand to Petunikov and said, "Well, 500. "Not more than 100 rubles." Igor Terentьevich Petunikov shrugged his shoulders, as if sorry at being unable to give more, and touched the soldier's hairy hand with his long white fingers. They soon ended the matter, for the soldier gave in quickly and met Petunikov's wishes. And when Vavilov had received the 100 rubles and signed the paper, he threw the pen down on the table and said bitterly, "Now I will have a nice time. They will laugh at me. They will cry shame on me, the devils." "But you tell them that I paid all your claims," suggested Petunikov, calmly puffing out clouds of smoke and watching them float upwards. "But do you think they will believe it? They are as clever swindlers, if not worse." Vavilov stopped himself in time before making the intended comparison, and looked at the merchant's son in terror. The other smoked on, and seemed to be absorbed in that occupation. He went away soon, promising to destroy the nest of vagabonds. Vavilov looked after him and sighed, feeling as if he would like to shout some insult at the young man, who was going with such firm steps towards the steep road, encumbered with its ditches and heaps of rubbish. In the evening the captain appeared in the eating-house. His eyebrows were knit, and his fist clenched. Vavilov smiled at him in a guilty manner. "Well, worthy descendant of Judas and Cain, tell us." "They decided," said Vavilov, sighing and lowering his eyes. "I don't doubt it. How many silver pieces did you receive?" 400 rubles. "Of course you're lying, but all the better for me." Without any further words, Igorka, 10% of it for my discovery, 4% to the teacher, for writing the petition, 1 vedro of vodka, to all of us, and refreshments all round. Give me the money. Now the vodka and refreshments will do at 8 o'clock. Vavilov turned purple with rage, and stared at Kuvalda with witty open eyes. "This is humbug, this is robbery. I will do nothing of the sort." "What do you mean, Aristid Fomitch? Keep your appetite for the next feast. I am not afraid of you now." Kuvalda looked at the clock. "I give you 10 minutes, Igorka, for your idiotic talk. Finish your nonsense by that time, and give me what I demand. If you don't, I will devour you." "Kanitz has sold you something. Did you read in the paper about the theft at Basov's house? Do you understand? You won't have time to hide anything. We will not let you. And this very night, do you understand?" "Why, Aristid Fomitch," sobbed the discomfited merchant. "No more words. Did you understand or not?" Tall, gray, and imposing, Kuvalda spoke in half whispers, and his deep bass voice rang through the house. Vavilov always feared him, because he was not only a retired military man, but a man who had nothing to lose. But now Kuvalda appeared before him in a new role. He did not speak much and jocosely as usual, but spoke in the tone of a commander who was convinced of the other's guilt, and Vavilov felt that the captain could and would ruin him with the greatest pleasure. He must needs bow before this power. But nevertheless, the soldier thought of trying him once more. He sighed deeply, and began with apparent calmness. "It is truly said that a man's sin will find him out. I lied to you, Aristid Fomitch. I tried to be cleverer than I am. I only received 100 rubles. "Go on," said Kuvalda. "And not 400, as I told you. That means—" "It does not mean anything. It is all the same to me, whether you lied or not. You owe me 65 rubles. That is not much, eh?" "Oh, my lord Aristid Fomitch, I have always been attentive to your honor, and done my best to please you." "Drop all that, Igorka, grandchild of Judas." "All right, I will give it you. Only God will punish you for this." "Silence, you rotten pimple of the earth," shouted the captain, rolling his eyes. "He has punished me enough already in forcing me to have conversation with you. I will kill you on the spot like a fly." He shook his fist in Vavilov's face and ground his teeth till they nearly broke. After he had gone, Vavilov began smiling and winking to himself. Then 2 large drops rolled down his cheeks. They were grayish, and they hid themselves in his mustache, whilst 2 others followed them. Then Vavilov went into his own room and stood before the icon. Stood there, without praying immovable with the salt tears running down his wrinkled brown cheeks. Deacon Taras, who as a rule loved to loiter in the woods and fields, proposed to the creatures that once were men that they should go together into the fields, and there drink Vavilov's vodka in the bosom of nature. But the captain and all the rest swore at the deacon, and decided to drink it in the courtyard. 123 counted Aristid Fomich, our full number is 30. The teacher is not here, but probably many other outcasts will come. Let us calculate, say 20 persons, and to every person 2.5 cucumbers, a pound of bread, and a pound of meat. That won't be bad. 1 bottle of vodka each, and there is plenty of sour cabbage, and 3 watermelons. I ask you, what the devil could you want more, my scoundrel friends? Now, then let us prepare to devour Igorka Vavilov, because all this is his blood and body. They spread some old clothes on the ground, setting the delicacies and the drink on them, and sat around the feast solemnly and quietly, but almost unable to control the craving for drink that shone in their eyes. The evening began to fall, and its shadows were cast on the human refuse of the earth in the courtyard of the Doss house. The last rays of the sun illumined the roof of the tumble-down building. The night was cold and silent. Let us begin, brothers, commanded the captain. How many cups have we? 6. And there are 30 of us. Alexei Maximovich, pour it out. Is it ready now? Then the first toast come along. They drank and shouted and began to eat. The teacher is not here. I have not seen him for 3 days. Has anyone seen him? Asked Kuvalda. No one. It is unlike. Let us drink to the health of Aristid Kuvalda, the only friend who has never deserted me for one moment of my life. Devil take him all the same. I might have had something to wear, had he left my society at least for a little while. You are bitter, said Abiedok, and coughed. The captain, with his feeling of superiority to the others, never talked with his mouth full. Having drunk twice, the company began to grow merry. The food was grateful to them. Poltara Taras expressed his desire to hear a tale, but the deacon was arguing with Kubarov over his preferring thin women to stout ones, and paid no attention to his friend's request. He was asserting his views on the subject to Kubarov with all the decision of a man who was deeply convinced in his own mind. The foolish face of Meteor, who was lying on the ground, showed that he was drinking in the deacon's strong words. Martyanov sat clasping his large hairy hands round his knees, looking silently and sadly at the bottle of vodka, and pulling his mustache as if trying to bite it with his teeth, while Abiedok was teasing Tyapa. I have seen you watching the place where your money is hidden. That is your luck, shouted Tyapa. I will go halves with you, brother. All right, take it and welcome. Kuvalda felt angry with these men among them, all there was not one worthy of hearing his oratory or of understanding him. I wonder where the teacher is, he asked loudly. Martyanov looked at him and said he will come soon. I am positive that he will come, but he won't come in a carriage. Let us drink to your future health. If you kill any rich man, go halves with me. Then I shall go to America, brother, to those, what do you call them, limpas pampas, I will go there. And I will work my way until I become the President of the United States. And then I will challenge the whole of Europe to war, and I will blow it up. I will buy the army in Europe. That is, I will invite the French, the Germans, the Turks, and so on, and I will kill them by the hands of their own relatives. Just as Ilya Maromets bought a Tartar, with money it would be possible even for Ilya to destroy the whole of Europe. And to take Judas Petrenikov for his valet, he would go give him 100 rubles a month. And he would go, but he would be a bad valet because he would soon begin to steal. Now, besides that, the thin woman is better than the stout one, because she costs 1 less, said the deacon convincingly. My first deaconess used to buy 12 arshins for her clothes, but the second one only 10, and so on, even in the matter of provisions and food. Poltara Taras smiled guiltily, turning his head towards the deacon, and looking straight at him, he said with conviction. I had a wife once too. Oh, that happens to everyone, remarked Kuvalda, but go on with your lies. She was thin, but she ate a lot, and even died from overeating. You poisoned her, you hunchback, said Abiedok confidently. No, by God, it was from eating sturgeon, said Poltara Taras. But I say that you poisoned her, declared Abiedok decisively. It often happened that, having said something absolutely impossible, and without proof, he kept on repeating it, beginning in a childish, capricious tone, and gradually raising his voice to a mad shriek. The deacon stood up for his friend. No, he did not poison her, he had no reason to do so. But I say that he poisoned her, swore Abiedok. Silence, shouted the captain, threateningly, becoming still angrier. He looked at his friends with his blinking eyes, and not discovering anything to further provoke his rage in their half-tipsy faces. He lowered his head, sat still for a little while, and then turned over on his back on the ground. Meteor was biting cucumbers. He took a cucumber in his hand without looking at it, put nearly half of it into his mouth, and bit it with his yellow teeth so that the juice spurted out in all directions and ran over his cheeks. He did not seem to want to eat, but this process pleased him. Mardianov sat motionless on the ground like a statue, and looked in a dull manner at the Hafedro bottle, already getting empty. A Biedak lay on his belly, and coughed, shaking all over his small body. The rest of the dark, silent figures sat and lay around in all sorts of positions, and their tatters made them look like untidy animals created by some strange, uncouth deity to make a mockery of man. There once lived a lady in Susdale. A strange lady. She fell into hysterics. Most unpleasantly, sang the deacon in low tones, embracing Alexei Maximovich, who was smiling kindly into his face. Poltara Taras giggled voluptuously. The night was approaching. High up in the sky, the stars were shining, and on the mountain, and in the town, the lights of the lamps were appearing. The whistles of the steamers were heard all over the river, and the doors of Vavilov's eating house opened noisily. Two dark figures entered the courtyard, and one of them asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you drinking?" And the other said in a jealous aside, "Just see what devils they are." Then a hand stretched over the deacon's head and took away the bottle, and the characteristic sound of vodka being poured into a glass was heard. Then they all protested loudly. "Oh, this is sad," shouted the deacon Krivoi. "Let us remember the ancients, let us sing on the banks of the Babylonian rivers." "But can he?" asked Simtsov. He was a chorister in the bishop's choir. "Now then, Krivoi on the rivers." The deacon's voice was loud and hoarse and cracked, but his friend sang in a shrill falsetto. The dirty building loomed large in the darkness, and seemed to be coming nearer, threatening the singers who were arousing its dull echoes. The heavy, pompous clouds were floating in the sky over their heads. One of the creatures that once were men was snoring. The rest, not yet so drunk, ate and drank quietly or spoke to each other at long intervals. It was unusual for them to be in such low spirits during such a feast with so much vodka. Somehow the drink tonight did not seem to have its usual exhilarating effect. "Stop howling, you dogs," said the captain to the singers, raising his head from the ground to listen. "Someone is passing in a droshky." A droshky at such a time in the main street could not but attract general attention. Who would risk crossing the ditches between it and the town? And why they all raised their heads and listened in the silence of the night. The wheels were distinctly heard. They came gradually nearer. A voice was heard asking roughly, "Well, where then?" Someone answered, "It must be there, that house." "I shall not go any further." "They are coming here," shouted the captain. "The police," someone whispered in great alarm. "In a droshky, fool," said Mardianov quietly. Kuvalda got up and went to the entrance. "Is this a lodging house?" asked someone in a trembling voice. "Yes, belonging to Aristid Kuvalda," said the captain roughly. "Oh, did a reporter, one Titov, live here?" "Aha, have you brought him?" "Yes." "Drunk?" Roman 99. "That means he is very drunk, I teacher. Now then, get up." "Wait, I will help you. He is very ill. He has been with me for the last 2 days. Take him under the arms. The doctor has seen him. He is very bad." Tyapa got up and walked to the entrance, but a Biedak laughed and took another drink. "Strike a light there," shouted the captain. Meteor went into the house and lighted the lamp. Then a thin line of light streamed out over the courtyard, and the captain and another man managed to get the teacher into the doss house. His head was hanging on his breast, his feet trailed on the ground, and his arms hung limply as if broken. With Tyapa's help, they placed him on a wide board. He was shivering all over. "We worked on the same paper. He is very unlucky," I said. "Stay in my house. You are not in my way." But he begged me to send him home. He was so excited about it that I brought him here, thinking it might do him good. Home, this is it, isn't it? "Do you suppose he has a home anywhere else?" asked Kuvalda, roughly looking at his friend Tyapa. "Fetch me some cold water." "I fancy I am of no more use," remarked the man in some confusion. The captain looked at him critically. His clothes were rather shiny and tightly buttoned up to his chin. His trousers were frayed, his hat almost yellow with age and crumpled like his lean and hungry face. "No, you are not necessary. We have plenty like you here," said the captain, turning away. "Then goodbye." The man went to the door and said quietly from there, If anything happens, let me know in the publishing office. My name is Ridjoff. I might write a short obituary. You see, he was an active member of the press. In obituary, you say 20 lines, 40 kopecks. I will do more than that when he dies. I will cut off one of his legs and send it to you. That will be much more profitable than an obituary. It will last you for 3 days. His legs are fat, you devoured him. When he was alive, you may as well continue to do so after he is dead. The man sniffed strangely and disappeared. The captain sat down on the wooden board beside the teacher, felt his forehead and breast with his hands, and called Philip. The sound reechoed from the dirty walls of the Doss house and died away. This is absurd, brother, said the captain, quietly arranging the teacher's untidy hair with his hand. Then the captain listened to his breathing, which was rapid and uneven, and looked at his sunken gray face. He sighed and looked upon him, knitting his eyebrows. The lamp was a bad one. The light was fitful, and dark shadows flickered on the Doss house walls. The captain watched them, scratching his beard. Tayapa returned, bringing a vedro of water, and placing it by the teacher's head, he took his arm as if to raise him up. The water is not necessary, and the captain shook his head. But we must try to revive him, said the old rag collector. Nothing is needed, said the captain decidedly. They sat silently, looking at the teacher. Let us go and drink, old devil. But can you do him any good? Tayapa turned his back on the teacher, and both went out into the courtyard to their companions. What is it? Asked Abiadak, turning his sharp nose to the old man. The snoring of those who were asleep, and the tinkling sound of pouring vodka, was heard. The deacon was murmuring something. The clouds swam low, so low that it seemed as if they would touch the roof of the house and knock it over on the group of men. Ah, one feels sad when someone near at hand is dying, faltered the captain with his head down. No one answered him. He was the best among you, the cleverest, the most respectable. I mourn for him. Rest with the saints, sing, you crooked hunchback, roared the deacon, digging his friend in the ribs. Be quiet, shouted Abiadak, jumping vengefully to his feet. I will give him one on the head, proposed Martianov, raising his head from the ground. You are not asleep, Aristid Fomich? Asked him very softly. Have you heard about our teacher? Martianov lazily got up from the ground, looked at the line of light coming out of the Doss house, shook his head, and silently sat down beside the captain. Nothing particular, the man is dying, remarked the captain shortly. Have they been beating him? Asked Abiadak with great interest. The captain gave no answer. He was drinking vodka at the moment. They must have known we had something in which to commemorate him. After his death, continued Abiadak, lighting a cigarette, someone laughed, someone sighed, generally speaking the conversation of Abiadak. And the captain did not interest them, and they hated having to think at all. They had always felt the teacher to be an uncommon man, but now many of them were drunk, and the others sad and silent. Only the deacon suddenly drew himself up straight and howled wildly. And may the righteous rest. You idiot, hissed Abiadak, what are you howling for? Fool, said Tayapa's hoarse voice, when a man is dying, one must be quiet so that he may have peace. Silence reigned once more. The cloudy sky threatened thunder, and the earth was covered with the thick darkness of an autumn night. Let us go on drinking, proposed Kuvalda, filling up the glasses. I will go and see if he wants anything, said Tayapa. He wants a coffin, jeered the captain. Don't speak about that, begged Abiadak in a low voice. Meteor rose and followed Tayapa. The deacon tried to get up but fell and swore loudly. When Tayapa had gone, the captain touched Martianov's shoulder and said in low tones, Well, Martianov, you must feel it more than the others you were, but let that go to the devil, don't you pity Philip. No, said the ex-jailer quietly, I do not feel things of this sort, brother. I have learned better. This life is disgusting. After all, I speak seriously when I say that I should like to kill someone. Do you, said the captain, indistinctly. Well, let's have another drink. It's not a long job, ours a little drink, and then. The others began to wake up, and Simtsov shouted in a blissful voice, Brothers, one of you pour out a glass for the old man. They poured out a glass and gave it to him. Having drunk it, he tumbled down again, knocking against another man. As he fell, 2 or 3 minutes silence ensued, dark as the autumn night. What do you say? I say that he was a good man, a quiet and good man, whispered a low voice. Yes, and he had money too, and he never refused it to a friend. Again silence ensued. He is dying, said Tayapa, hoarsely from behind the captain's head. Aristid Fomich got up and went with firm steps into the Doss house. Don't go, Tayapa stopped him. Don't go, you are drunk. It is not right, the captain stopped and thought. And what is right on this earth, go to the devil? And he pushed Tayapa aside. On the walls of the DOS house, the shadows were creeping, seeming to chase each other. The teacher lay on the board at full length and snored. His eyes were wide open, his naked breast rose and fell heavily, the corners of his mouth foamed. And on his face was an expression, as if he wished to say something very important, but found it difficult to do so. The captain stood with his hands behind him and looked at him in silence. He then began in a silly way. Philip, say something to me, a word of comfort to a friend. Come, I love you, brother. All men are beasts. You were the only man for me. Though you were a drunkard, ah, how you did drink vodka. Philip, that was the ruin of you. You ought to have listened to me. And controlled yourself, did I not once say to you? The mysterious, all-destroying reaper, called Death, made up his mind to finish the terrible work quickly, as if insulted by the presence of this drunken man. At the dark and solemn struggle, the teacher sighed deeply, and quivered all over, stretched himself out, and died. The captain stood shaking to and fro, and continued to talk to him. Do you want me to bring you vodka? But it is better that you should not drink. Philip, control yourself, or else drink. Why should you really control yourself? For what reason, Philip, for what reason? He took him by the foot and drew him closer to himself. Are you dozing, Philip? Well, then sleep good night tomorrow. I shall explain all this to you, and you will understand that it is not really necessary to deny yourself anything, but go on sleeping now if you are not dead. He went out to his friends, followed by the deep silence, and informed them. Whether he is sleeping or dead, I do not know. I am a little drunk. Tayapa bent further forward than usual, and crossed himself respectfully. Mardianov dropped to the ground and lay. There Biedak moved quietly, and said in a low and wicked tone, May you all go to the devil dead. What of that? Why should I care? Why should I speak about it? It will be time enough when I come to die myself. I am not worse than other people. That is true, said the captain loudly, and fell to the ground. The time will come when we shall all die like others. Ha ha, how shall we live? That is nothing, but we shall die like everyone else. And this is the whole end of life, take my word for it. A man lives only to die, and he dies. And if this be so, what does it matter how, or where he died, or how he lived? Am I right, Mardianov? Let us therefore drink whilst we still have life. The rain began to fall. Thick, close darkness covered the figures that lay scattered over the ground, half drunk, half asleep. The light in the windows of the Doss house flickered, paled, and suddenly disappeared. Probably the wind blew it out, or else the oil was exhausted. The drops of rain sounded strangely on the iron roof of the Doss house above the mountain, where the town lay. The ringing of bells was heard, rung by the watchers in the churches. The brazen sound coming from the belfry rang out into the dark and died away. And before its last indistinct note was drowned, another stroke was heard, and the monotonous silence was again broken by the melancholy clang of bells. The next morning Tayapa was the first to wake up, lying on his back. He looked up into the sky. Only in such a position did his deformed neck permit him to see the clouds above his head. This morning the sky was of a uniform gray. Up there hung the damp, cold mist of dawn, almost extinguishing the sun, hiding the unknown vastness behind, and pouring despondency over the earth. Tayapa crossed himself, and leaning on his elbow looked round to see whether there was any vodka left. The bottle was there, but it was empty. Crossing over his companions, he looked into the glasses from which they had drunk, found one of them almost full emptied. It wiped his lips with his sleeve and began to shake the captain. The captain raised his head and looked at him with sad eyes. We must inform the police. Get up. Of what? Asked the captain sleepily and angrily. What, is he not dead? Who? The learned one. Philip Yees. Did you forget? Alas, said Tayapa hoarsely. The captain rose to his feet, yawned, and stretched himself till all his bones cracked. Well then, go and give information. I will not go, I do not like them, said the captain morosely. Well then, wake up the deacon, I shall go at any rate. All right, deacon, get up. The captain entered the Doss house and stood at the teacher's feet. The dead man lay at full length, his left hand on his breast, the right hand held, as if ready to strike someone. The captain thought that if the teacher got up now, he would be as tall as Paltara Taras. Then he sat by the side of the dead man, and sighed as he remembered that they had lived together for the last 3 years. Tayapa entered holding his head like a goat which is ready to butt. He sat down quietly and seriously on the opposite side of the teacher's body, looked into the dark, silent face, and began to sob. So he is dead, I too shall die soon. It is quite time for that, said the captain gloomily. It is Tyapa agreed, you ought to die too, anything is better than this. But perhaps death might be worse, how do you know? It could not be worse. When you die you have only God to deal with, but here you have to deal with men, and men, what are they? Enough, be quiet, interrupted Cuvalda angrily. And in the dawn which filled the Doss house, a solemn stillness reigned over all. Long and silently they sat at the feet of their dead companion, seldom looking at him, and both plunged in thought. Then Tyapa asked, "Will you bury him?" "I know, let the police bury him. You took money from Vavilov for this petition, and I will give you some if you have not enough. Though I have his money still, I shall not bury him." "That is not right, you are robbing the dead. I will tell them all that you want to keep his money," Tyapa threatened him. "You are a fool, you old devil," said Cuvalda contemptuously. "I am not a fool, but it is not right nor friendly." "Enough, be off." "How much money is there?" 25 rubles, said Cuvalda absently. "So you might gain a 5-ruble note." "You old scoundrel," and looking into Tyapa's face the captain swore. "Well, what gives? Go to the devil, I am going to spend this money in erecting a monument to him." "What does he want that for?" "I will buy a stone and an anchor. I shall place the stone on the grass, and attach the anchor to it with a very heavy chain." "Why, you are playing tricks." "Well, it is no business of yours." "Look out, I shall tell again," threatened Tyapa. Aristide Fomitch looked at him sullenly, and said nothing. Again they sat there, in that silence, which in the presence of the dead is so full of mystery. "Listen, they are coming." Tyapa got up and went out of the Doss house. Then there appeared at the door the doctor, the police inspector of the district, and the examining magistrate or coroner. All three came in turn, looked at the dead teacher, and then went out, throwing suspicious glances at Cuvalda. He sat there without taking any notice of them, until the police inspector asked him, "Of what did he die?" "Ask him. I think his evil life hastened his end." "What?" asked the coroner. "I say that he died of a disease to which he had not been accustomed." Yes, had he been ill long?" "Bring him over here. I cannot see him properly," said the doctor in a melancholy tone. "Probably there are signs of—" "Now then, ask someone here to carry him out." The police inspector ordered Cuvalda. "Go and ask them yourself. He is not in my way here," the captain replied indifferently. "Well," shouted the inspector, making a ferocious face. "Few," answered Cuvalda without moving from his place, and gnashing his teeth restlessly. "The devil take it," shouted the inspector so madly that the blood rushed to his face. "I'll make you pay for this ill." "Good morning, gentlemen," said the merchant Petunikov, with a sweet smile, making his appearance in the door. He looked round, trembled, took off his cap, and crossed himself. Then a pompous, wicked smile crossed his face, and looking at the captain, he inquired respectfully, "What has happened? Has there been a murder here?" "Yes, something of that sort," replied the coroner. Petunikov sighed deeply, crossed himself again, and spoke in an angry tone. "By God, it is just as I feared. It always ends in your having to come here. I, God save everyone, times without number have I refused to lease this house to this man, and he has always won me over. And I was afraid, you know, they are such awful people. Better give it them, I thought, or else." He covered his face with his hands, tugged at his beard, and sighed again. "They are very dangerous men, and this man here is their leader, the ataman of the robbers. But we will make him smart," promised the inspector, looking at the captain with revengeful eyes. "Yes, brother, we are old friends of yours," said Cuvalda, in a familiar tone. "How many times have I paid you to be quiet?" "Gentlemen," shouted the inspector, "did you hear him? I want you to bear witness to this. Aha! I shall make short work of you, my friend, remember. Don't count your chickens before they are hatched," my friend, said Aristide Fomitch. The doctor, a young man with eyeglasses, looked at him curiously, the coroner with an attention that boded him no good, Petunikov with triumph, while the inspector could hardly restrain himself from throwing himself upon him. The dark figure of Mardianov appeared at the door of the Doss house. He entered quietly and stood behind Petunikov, so that his chin was on a level with the merchant's head. Behind him stood the deacon, opening his small, swollen red eyes. "Let us be doing something, gentlemen," suggested the doctor. Mardianov made an awful grimace and suddenly sneezed on Petunikov's head. The latter gave a yell, sat down hurriedly, and then jumped aside, almost knocking down the inspector, into whose open arms he fell. "Do you see," said the frightened merchant, pointing to Mardianoff, "do you see what kind of men they are?" Cuvalda burst out laughing. The doctor and the coroner smiled too, and at the door of the Doss house, the group of figures was increasing. Sleepy figures, with swollen faces, red inflamed eyes, and disheveled hair, staring rudely at the doctor, the coroner, and the inspector. "Where are you going?" said the policeman on guard at the door, catching hold of their tatters and pushing them aside, but he was one against many, and without taking any notice they all entered, and stood there reeking of vodka, silent and evil-looking. Cuvalda glanced at them, then at the authorities, who were angry at the intrusion of these ragamuffins, and said smilingly, "Gentlemen, perhaps you would like to make the acquaintance of my lodgers and friends, would you? But whether you wish it or not, you will have to make their acquaintance sooner or later in the course of your duties." The doctor smiled in an embarrassed way, the coroner pressed his lips together, and the inspector saw that it was time to go. Therefore he shouted, "Sideroff, whistle, tell them to bring a cart here." "I will go," said Petunikov, coming forward from a corner. "You had better take it away today, sir. I want to pull down this hole. Go away, or else I shall apply to the police." The policeman's whistle echoed through the courtyard at the door of the Doss house. Its inhabitants stood in a group, yawning and scratching themselves. "And so you do not wish to be introduced? That is rude of you," laughed Aristid Fomitch. Petunikov took his purse from his pocket, took out 2 5-kopek pieces, put them at the feet of the dead man, and crossed himself. "God have mercy on the burial of the sinful." "What," yelled the captain, "you give for the burial? Take them away. I say, you scoundrel, how dare you give your stolen kopecks? For the burial of an honest man, I will tear you limb from limb." "Your honor," cried the terrified merchant to the inspector, seizing him by the elbow. The doctor and the coroner jumped aside. The inspector shouted, "Sideroff, come here." The creatures that once were men stood along the wall, looking and listening with an interest which put new life into their broken-down bodies. Cuvalda, shaking his fist at Petunikov's head, roared and rolled his eyes like a wild beast. "Scoundrel and thief, take back your money. Dirty worm, take it back, I say, or else I shall cram it down your throat. Take your 5-kopek pieces." Petunikov put out his trembling hand towards his mite, and protecting his head from Cuvalda's fist with the other hand, said, "You are my witnesses, Sir Inspector, and you good people." "We are not good people, merchant," said the voice of a Biedak, trembling with anger. The inspector whistled impatiently, with his other hand protecting Petunikov, who was stooping in front of him, as if trying to enter his belly. "You dirty toad, I shall compel you to kiss the feet of the dead man. How would you like that?" And catching Petunikov by the neck, Cuvalda hurled him against the door as if he had been a cat. The creatures that once were men sprang aside quickly to let the merchant fall, and down he fell at their feet, crying wildly, "Murder, help, murder!" Mardianoff slowly raised his foot and brought it down heavily on the merchant's head. A Biedak spat in his face. With a grin, the merchant, creeping on all fours, threw himself into the courtyard, at which everyone laughed. But by this time, the 2 policemen had arrived, and pointing to Cuvalda, the inspector said pompously, "Arrest him and bind him hand and foot." "You dare not." "I shall not run away. I will go wherever you wish," said Cuvalda, freeing himself from the policeman at his side. The creatures that once were men disappeared one after the other. A cart entered the yard. Some ragged wretches brought out the dead man's body. "Ill teach you, you just wait," thundered the inspector at Cuvalda. "How now, Ataman?" asked Petunikov maliciously, excited, and pleased at the sight of his enemy. "In bonds, what, you fell into the trap, eh? You just wait." But Cuvalda was quiet now. He stood strangely straight and silent between the 2 policemen, watching the teacher's body being placed in the cart. The man who was holding the head of the corpse was very short, and could not manage to place it on the cart at the same time as the legs. For a moment the body hung as if it would fall to the ground, and hide itself beneath the earth, away from these foolish and wicked disturbers of its peace. "Take him away," ordered the inspector, pointing to the captain. Cuvalda silently moved forward without protestation, passing the cart, on which was the teacher's body. He bowed his head before it, without looking. Mardianoff, with his strong face, followed him. The courtyard of the merchant Petunikov emptied quickly. "Now then, go on," called the driver, striking the horses with the whip. The cart moved off over the rough surface of the courtyard. The teacher was covered with a heap of rags, and his belly projected from beneath them. It seemed as if he were laughing quietly at the prospect of leaving the Doss house, never, never to return. Petunikov, who was following him with his eyes, crossed himself, and then began to shake the dust and rubbish off his clothes. And the more he shook himself, the more pleased and self-satisfied. Did he feel he saw the tall figure of Aristid Fomitch Kuvalda in a gray cap, with a red band, with his arms bound behind his back being led away. Petunikov smiled the smile of the conqueror, and went back into the doss house, but suddenly he stopped and trembled at the door. Facing him stood an old man with a stick in his hand and a large bag on his back, a horrible old man in rags and tatters, which covered his bony figure. He bent under the weight of his burden, and lowered his head on his breast, as if he wished to attack the merchant. "What are you? Who are you?" shouted Petunikov. "A man," he answered in a hoarse voice. This hoarseness pleased and tranquilized Petunikov. He even smiled. "A man, and are there really men like you?" Stepping aside, he let the old man pass. He went saying slowly, "Men are of various kinds, as God wills. There are worse than me, still worse, yes." The cloudy sky hung silently over the dirty yard, and over the cleanly dressed man with the pointed beard, who was walking about there measuring distances with his steps. And with his sharp eyes on the roof of the old house, a crow perched and croaked, thrusting its head, now backwards, now forwards, in the lowering gray clouds, which hid the sky. There was something hard and merciless, as if they had gathered together to wash all the dirt off the face of this unfortunate, suffering, and sorrowful earth.